There is a baseball record that has stood for nearly 100 years. 191 runs batted in a single season. Not one player in the history of the sport across nearly a century of trying has come within 15 of that number. The man who said it died at 48 years old with no money, no family willing to claim his body, and a reputation built more on two drop fly balls than on the greatest offensive season baseball has ever seen. His name was Hack Wilson, and almost nobody talks about him anymore. To understand what destroyed Hack Wilson, you have to go back to where he began. Lewis Robert Wilson was born on April 26, 1900. At 16, Lewis dropped out of school in the 6th grade and went to work at a locomotive factory, swinging a sledgehammer for 12 hours a day, earning $4 a week. That punishing labor packed muscle onto a frame that was already unusual. Wilson stood 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed nearly 200 pounds. He had an 18-inch neck and feet so small they fit into a size 5.5 shoe. The great sports writer Shirley Povich wrote that he had been built along the lines of a beer keg and was not wholly unfamiliar with its contents. What historians have since recognized is that Wilson's unusual proportions were almost certainly the hallmarks of fetal alcohol syndrome, caused by his mother's drinking during pregnancy. The condition was not understood in 1900, nobody gave it a name. But the irony is almost too painful to say aloud. The very thing that would eventually take his life at 48 years old had been inside him from the very first moment he entered the world. And yet he became a legend. Born to two people who never married, both of them heavy drinkers, mother dead at 24, father absent, raised by strangers, dropped out in the 6th grade, no advantages, no connections, no name that meant anything to anyone. Wilson signed his first professional contract in 1921 with the Martinsburg Blue Sox of the Class D Blue Ridge League. In his very first game, he broke his leg sliding into home plate. The injury forced him to move from catcher to the outfield, which turned out to be the best accident of his baseball life. By 1923, John McGraw, the legendary manager of the New York Giants, purchased Wilson's contract. Wilson joined New York, played in all 7 games of the 1924 World Series, and hit 295 that year. It seemed like the beginning of something real. Then 1925 arrived. Wilson could not hit the curveball. He struggled badly, and McGraw sent him down to the minor league affiliate in Toledo. At the end of that season, the Giants forgot to protect Wilson's contract, and the last-place Chicago Cubs drafted him for $5,000. $5,000 for a man McGraw had paid $10,500 to acquire. When Giants outfielder Ross Youngs heard about the transaction, he told a reporter plainly, "The Giants just let go of the best outfielder I ever played alongside, and they are going to regret it." He was right. McGraw later called it one of the worst mistakes of his managerial career. But Wilson himself knew before he ever left. He looked at McGraw and said, "I may not be good enough to play on your ball club, but I will be back someday, playing for a better one." That is not the statement of a broken man. Wilson walked out of New York carrying that belief, and what he did over the next 5 years in Chicago would make McGraw wince every time he opened a newspaper. Chicago, in the 1920s, was exactly the kind of city that Lewis Wilson was built for. Prohibition had made alcohol illegal across the country, but in Chicago, the speakeasies ran openly, and if you knew where to look, you could find a drink on any corner of the North Side. Wilson always knew where to look, but Chicago also gave him Joe McCarthy. McCarthy was the manager of the Chicago Cubs, and by every account, the right man for this particular talent. He did not believe in bed checks or detectives trailing his players. He did not find men for their personal habits as long as they showed up at game time, and Hack Wilson always showed up at game time. Sports writer Frank Graham wrote that McCarthy understood Wilson, made allowances for him when he failed, and rewarded him with praise when he did well. McCarthy bailed Wilson out after late-night altercations, ran interference with the Cubs owner William Wrigley, who despised alcohol, and directed all of that turbulent energy onto the field where it became something extraordinary. The results were immediate. From 1926 through 1928, Wilson led the National League in home runs 3 consecutive seasons. Chicago fell in love with him. Fans packed Wrigley Field just to watch him swing. Away from the field, he gave them plenty to discuss. On May 24th, 1926, he hit one of the longest home runs in Wrigley Field history. Then that same night was arrested in a police raid on a speakeasy caught escaping through the rear window. The fine was $1. On the 4th of July, 1929, he charged into the Cincinnati Reds' dugout after pitcher Ray Culp shouted a particular insult at him from the bench. Given what we know about Wilson's childhood and being born outside of marriage, you can understand why that word landed differently than it might have for someone else. The Cincinnati newspaper reported he departed with a smile on his face, and the show proceeded as if nothing unusual had happened. When asked if he ever played under the influence of alcohol, Wilson had what became his most famous response. "I never played when fully intoxicated," he said. Feeling the effects of the night before, yes, many times, but not fully intoxicated. He also told one sports writer, "When I see 3 balls at the plate, I just swing at the one in the middle." 1930. What Wilson produced over 155 games that season remains, nearly 100 years later, one of the most staggering individual performances in the history of professional baseball. He hit 56 home runs. The National League had never seen that number. It would not see it again for 68 years. He batted .356. His slugging percentage was .723. And then there were the runs batted in. 191. Lou Gehrig drove in 185 the very next season, still the second highest total in the history of the sport. Hank Greenberg drove in 184 in 1937. Jimmy Fox drove in 175 in 1938. Nobody since has come within 15 of Wilson's mark. Not with modern training, not with modern nutrition, not with every analytical advantage the game now possesses. In August alone, he drove in 53 runs and hit 13 home runs. Here is where the story takes an almost impossible turn. In 1999, historian Jerome Holtzman went back through the 1930 box scores and found a run Wilson drove in had been mistakenly credited to teammate Charlie Grimm. Wilson had not driven in 190 runs, he had driven in 191. The commissioner of baseball officially updated the record. Hack Wilson had been dead for 51 years. He never knew his record was larger than history had given him credit for. A sports writer of that era wrote simply, "For a brief span of a few years, this hammered-down little strongman actually rivaled the mighty Ruth, this barrel-shaped outfielder from Pennsylvania Steel Country, whose bat handle had to be shaved down because his hands were too small to grip a standard one." Before we move forward, we need to go back 1 year to an October afternoon in Philadelphia that Hack Wilson carried inside him for the rest of his life. The 1929 Cubs were a great team. Wilson had driven in 159 runs that year, leading the National League. In the World Series against the Philadelphia Athletics, he hit 471. By any measure, he was the best hitter in the building. Then came Game 4. The Cubs led 8-0 in the 7th inning. 8-0. Their pitching staff was cruising, and then Bing Miller hit a fly ball to center field. Wilson tracked it, sunglasses on, and lost it completely in the blinding October sun. It fell for a single. The inning continued. With runners on base, Mule Haas hit another fly ball to center. Wilson drifted back, and again the sun took it from him. The ball sailed over his head. By the time Wilson found it, Haas had circled all the bases, inside the park home run. 3 runs scored, 8-7. The Athletics scored 10 runs that inning. 10, from 8-0 down. That 8-run deficit is still the largest overcome in postseason history. The Cubs lost the game, then lost the series. After the game, a young boy approached McCarthy and asked for a souvenir baseball. McCarthy, still absorbing what had just happened, looked at the boy and said, "Come back tomorrow and stand behind Wilson in center field. You will be able to pick up all the balls you want." He regretted it almost immediately, because when the reporters found him, he said something entirely different. "You cannot beat the sun," he told them quietly. The poor kid simply lost the ball in the sun, and he did not put the sun there. But according to teammate Kiki Kyler, who saw it with his own eyes, Wilson was inconsolable after the game, pushing through the crowd with red eyes, not stopping for anyone, not saying a single word. The press gave him the nickname Sonny Boy, and it was not a compliment. Outside the stadium, Hack climbed into a taxi with his 4-year-old son, Bobby. The boy looked up at his father in the silence and said, "Forget about them, Daddy, we will get them next year." There was no next year, not the kind the boy meant. Years later, working whatever jobs he could find in Baltimore, Wilson told people that everywhere he went, fans wanted to talk about those 2 drop balls. not 191 runs batted in, not 56 home runs. 2 fly balls on one October afternoon. Some wounds do not heal, no matter what you accomplish afterward. After the 1930 season, the Chicago Cubs made one decision that changed everything. They let Joe McCarthy go. In his place came Rogers Hornsby, statistically one of the greatest hitters who ever lived. In terms of personality, the opposite of McCarthy in every way. Hornsby was cold, rigid, and rules-driven. He imposed curfews, weight requirements, and fines without sympathy. For most players, a stricter manager is simply a stricter manager. For Hack Wilson, it was like removing the foundation from a building. Wilson reported to spring training 20 pounds heavier. Hornsby moved him from center field to right, restricted his free-swinging approach, and the National League introduced a new baseball that year with raised stitching to sharpen curveballs. Wilson had always struggled with the curve. The collapse was historic in its own way. In 1930, 191 runs batted in. In 1931, 61, 56 home runs became 13. A batting average of 356 became 261. One writer captured it perfectly. It was as if the Superman of 1930 had been exposed to kryptonite. By season's end, $6,500 in fines, a suspension after a confrontation on a train, and a public announcement from owner William Wrigley that Wilson needed to go. The Cubs traded him to the Cardinals, who offered a 77% pay cut. Wilson refused. The Cardinals sent him to Brooklyn. By 1934, playing for Casey Stengel's Dodgers, the end arrived in a scene baseball has been retelling ever since. At Baker Bowl in Philadelphia, the Dodgers pitcher Walter Beck was being removed from a game. Furious, Beck turned and threw the baseball at the tin right field wall. It hit with an enormous metallic crash. Wilson, resting his eyes during the pitching change, heard the bang, assumed a ball had been hit, sprang up, chased it down, and fired a strike to second base. Then he looked around and realized no game was in progress. The entire Phillies bench was in laughter. Beck became forever known as Boom Boom Beck. Wilson was released weeks later. His career was over. The years after Chicago took him to pool halls that failed, bartending shifts in Brooklyn, nightclubs that closed, and finally to Baltimore's City Hall in 1948 asking for any work at all. They made him manager of a public swimming pool. 1 week before his death, he appeared on a CBS radio program and spoke honestly about everything. What he said was later framed by Cubs manager Charlie Grimm and hung on the clubhouse wall, where it remained for generations of players to read. "Talent is not enough," Wilson said. "You need common sense and good advice. Do not be too proud to take advice. Do not let what happened to me happen to you." 1 week later, he fell in his apartment. Pneumonia developed. On November 23, 1948, he died. He was 48 years old, he had no money, and no one came to claim him. The drinking companions who had spent evenings with Wilson in Baltimore's taverns passed a hat to raise money for a funeral. National League President Ford Frick sent a check for $350 to cover a coffin. The undertaker donated a suit. His son Robert, who would later become a school principal, did not attend. Joe McCarthy organized a proper memorial months later. Former teammates came. A granite tombstone was placed over the grave reading, "One of baseball's immortals, Louis R. Hack Wilson, rests here." 31 years after his death, the Veterans Committee voted Hack Wilson into the Baseball Hall of Fame. The record has never moved. 191 runs batted in, single season, 1930. The man who managed a public swimming pool for his final paycheck and died without a dollar to his name still holds, nearly 100 years later, the most productive offensive season in the history of the sport. He wasted what he was given, and he said so himself into a microphone 1 week before the end. But the greatness was real. It happened. 191 does not go away because the man who produced it made difficult choices. Talent is not enough. He told us that. But for one summer in Chicago, the talent he had was enough to produce something that the entire sport has never been able to match. Now you know the story behind the number. If this video moved you, leave a comment telling me which moment hit you hardest. Share it with someone who loves baseball history or someone who needs to hear what talent alone cannot guarantee. And if you want more stories like this one, the next video is already waiting for you.